This changed her life in a way she never saw coming. I grew up hearing one sentence over and over again. Not, "I love you," not, "I'm proud of you." It was this: "If you don't like it, complain to your father." I heard it when the fridge was empty. I heard it when the power got cut off. I heard it when I dared to ask why I had to take care of everything while my mother stayed in bed. For years, that sentence felt like a door I wasn't allowed to open. And then one day, I finally did exactly what she told me to do. I complained to my father. What happened next didn't just change my life. It changed hers in a way she never saw coming. This is a story about gaslighting and about learning to protect yourself even from the people who are supposed to love you the most. Before I go on, I want to make something very clear. This is not a story about single moms are bad. This is not a story that says mental illness makes people evil. This is a story about one woman who happened to be both a single mother and mentally ill, and who chose again and again to make her children carry the weight she refused to lift herself. It's about what happens when, after a lifetime of being told to be quiet, one of those children finally tells the truth. My name is Emily. This is the long version. When my parents divorced, I was 5, going on 6. I don't remember all the details. I remember shouting behind closed doors, a suitcase by the front door, and the way my mother's voice got pitched and sharp every time my father's car pulled into the driveway. One day, he lived with us. The next day, he didn't. The court gave full custody to my mom. She got the house, she got the car, and she got us, me and my big sister, Jess. She also got something I didn't understand back then: child support. I was too little to know what that meant. All I knew was that grown-ups kept saying words like settlement and alimony and payments. But I learned fast what I was supposed to think, because my mother made it very clear. Everything wrong in our lives from that moment on, Dad's fault. If the shoes we wore to school had holes in them, she'd say, "Ask your father why I can't afford new ones." If the pantry was empty and our stomachs growled before school, it was, "Your father doesn't pay me enough. Go cry to him." I still remember that first time that line landed hard. I was standing on a kitchen chair trying to reach the cereal cabinet. There was nothing but a sticky jar of peanut butter and some salt. My stomach hurt from hunger. "Mom," I called, "there's no breakfast." She was on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her, noon sunlight coming through the blinds, daytime TV flickering with the sound turned low, cigarette smoke drifted in a lazy line toward the ceiling. She didn't look at me. "Then don't eat." "I'm hungry," I said, my voice shaking. That's when she turned, eyes sharp like I'd just insulted her. "You want breakfast?" she snapped. "Tell your father to buy it. He's the one with money. Go complain to him." I remember standing there, 6 years old, absorbing that. I was wrong for being hungry. I was wrong for asking her. And somehow, a man who didn't even live with us anymore was the reason there was nothing in our kitchen. That pattern never changed. If I came home from school to a dark living room because the electric bell got lost in the mail, she'd light a candle and mutter, "Your father doesn't care if you sit in the dark. Ask him to pay more." If water stopped running, "Your father doesn't care if you're dirty." If we needed supplies for a school project, "Your father should have thought of that before he walked out." there were only two roles in her version of the story. She was the martyr. He was the villain. We were props.
By the time I was 8, Mom had my sister and me trained like little soldiers. The rules were simple. Go straight home after school. Do your homework. Clean the house. Don't bother Mom. If Mom was in bed, we tiptoed. If she was watching TV, we stayed out of sight. If she was in a good mood, we pretended everything was fine. We were expected to clean the kitchen, do the laundry, cook dinner, watch each other, keep the house quiet. All of this while she lay on the couch or disappeared into her room. She called it being a team. In reality, it was free labor. If we complained, she'd explode. You think I like this? You think I asked to be a single mother? I work all day and come home to this pigsty? You two should be ashamed. Other kids help their moms. I must have failed as a parent for you to be so selfish. We were 8 and 10. We believed her. A normal evening looked like this. Jess would pull a frozen chicken out of the freezer at 4 because if it wasn't thawed by 6, there'd be hell to pay. I'd set the table, help with chopping, sweep the floor. Mom might emerge to yell that we weren't doing it right, then disappear again. Later, when she finally came into the kitchen to eat, she'd look around like the fairy godmother of housekeeping had blessed the house. "See?" she'd say, shrugging. "We manage just fine. We don't need anyone else." We, not you. The first time she hit me, I was 9. It wasn't a big dramatic movie slap, no screaming, no smashed dishes. I broke a glass while washing dishes. It slipped out of my wet hands and cracked in the sink. She walked in just as it happened, pieces everywhere, soapy water, my hands shaking. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Her face went still in that dangerous way. "You're sorry. Do you know how much glasses cost? Do you think they grow on trees?" I tried to pick up the bigger pieces. She grabbed my wrist, hard, and smacked the back of my head with the other hand. Not enough to give me a concussion, enough to make my ears ring and my eyes water. Stupid, careless child. I didn't cry out loud. That made it worse. Later that night, when I was lying in bed feeling the tender spot on my scalp, she opened my door. "I don't want you to tell anyone about what happens in this house. Not your teacher, not your friends, no one. You tell people our business and they'll take you away from me. Is that what you want?" "No," I whispered. "Good," she said and closed the door. From then on, the rule wasn't just complain to your father. It was also never complain to anyone else. Fast forward a few years. I was 16, Jess was 18 and about to graduate. That was when my grandmother, Mom's mother, died. We called her Nana. She was the kind of woman who saved plastic bags just in case and washed aluminum foil to reuse it. She'd grown up poor and never really stopped living like she might lose everything tomorrow. Nana had worked 2 jobs most of her life. She owned a tidy little brick house and had a decent amount of money tucked away in savings and investments. When she died, she left everything to my mother. After the funeral, after the sad sandwiches and bad coffee, I overheard numbers. $75,000. To my 16-year-old brain, that was infinite money. Mom reacted like someone had just told her she won the lottery. She held the check up in the kitchen and laughed, actually laughed in a way I'd never seen. She said, Finally, I get what I deserve. I've been busting my ass for years. Now it's my turn to rest." She quit her job within a month. When anyone asked why, she had a list of reasons.
I need time to grieve. My back hurts. My boss was toxic. I deserve a break after everything I've been through. For a while, it felt like we'd slipped into someone else's life. She bought takeout 3 nights a week. She got her hair done at an expensive salon. She bought new clothes, new shoes, new makeup. She went out drinking with friends from support groups. Bills went into a drawer. If they need money, they'll send a second notice, she said. Nana's careful, scraped-together money evaporated over one summer. By the time school started again in September, the bank account was almost empty. I know because I accidentally overheard the end of a phone call where Mom yelled at a customer service rep, then dissolved into tears, then hung up and screamed into a pillow. The next day, she gathered us in the kitchen. "Well, we're broke. Surprise, surprise. Your father never paid enough, and now the economy is terrible, and the bank is screwing me. We just have to tighten our belts." No mention of the takeout, the shoes, the nights out. Just, we're broke, and it's your father's fault. That was the year the script got an upgrade. Anytime I mentioned money, even my own, from my part-time job, she'd say, "Must be nice having cash. Maybe you'd like to start paying the water bill. It's not like your father does." If a utility got shut off, she'd shove the notice under my nose. "You have a job. Why can't you pay this?" Because I was a teenager making minimum wage. That's why. But we were too well trained to say that out loud. Robbed childhood, stolen credit. Senior year of high school was brutal. I was juggling AP classes, part-time job after school, college applications, housework, and my mother's mood swings. Meanwhile, Mom was living like a teenager with no curfew. She slept until noon, spent afternoons online, and went out late with friends. If a bill was shut off, she'd point at me. "You could have helped," she'd say. "But no, you had to waste your money on stupid things like bus passes and notebooks." Stupid things like surviving? If I dared to bring up the checks my father sent, she'd roll her eyes. "That child support is nothing. You think I can live on that? Most of it goes to your sister's tuition anyway." I believed that for a long time. Later, I would learn it was a total lie. Jess had been paying her own tuition with loans, scholarships, and a co-op job. Mom just liked to use her as an excuse. She had this habit of picking up the child support check, weaving it around, and calling it Mommy's paycheck. She said it jokingly, but the way her eyes gleamed when she said it made my skin crawl. College dreams. I loved school because it had rules that made sense. Do the homework, get the grade. Study, pass the test. Effort equals result. Home wasn't like that. You could scrub the bathroom until it shined and still be called lazy. You could cook dinner and still be told you were useless. So I clung to the idea of college like a lifeline. My guidance counselor loved me. My teachers loved me. My report cards were full of A's, and Emily is a pleasure to have in class. Some of them suggested big-name private universities. I didn't even bother. I knew Mom would never help, and we had no college savings. I aimed for something more realistic, a well-regarded state university with decent financial aid. Tuition plus room and board, about $15,000 a year. Still huge, but not impossible with grants and loans. During senior year, I did the following. I filled out the FAFSA as soon as my W-2 arrived. I did my taxes myself. I applied for scholarships. I worked part-time at a cafe after school. The financial aid package came back, grants, a small state scholarship, and federal loans. It would cover most of it. The rest I'd patch together with summer jobs and whatever Mom could spare, which I assumed would be something. I was wrong. freshman year and the first shredded W-2. Freshman year, I moved into a dorm 2 hours away. For the first time in my life, my home responsibilities were myself, my homework, and my half of the trash and dishes in a tiny shared room. No one screamed if I took a nap. No one demanded I clean the whole house. No one made me feel guilty for eating. It was weird. I still called Mom. I still went home for holidays. I still sent money when I could. But every time I went back, the air in the house felt heavier. She'd walk me through the empty pantry and complain. See, this is what it's like when you have kids in college. They eat you out of house and home and then disappear. Your father has no idea. Meanwhile, Jess had already graduated, and I was literally buying my own groceries. Spring semester, my W-2 from my summer job was mailed to my home address. I didn't think much of it. I figured Mom would put it on the table, like she did with most mail. Weeks passed. No envelope showed up in my dorm mailbox. I called. "Hey," I said, "did any tax forms come for me?" "I don't know," she said. "I don't pay attention to your junk mail." "It wouldn't be junk. It would say the cafe name on it." "I don't remember seeing it. You probably lost it." I let it go for a few days. Then Jess called me one weekend. You're not gonna like this." She'd come home to visit and seen my W-2 ripped in half in the kitchen trash. She'd recognized the name of my job on the envelope, fished the pieces out, and confronted Mom. "No," Mom had said. "It must have been junk, or I made a mistake. Whatever." When Jess pressed her, Mom changed the story. "Oh, I gave it to Sandra. She's a CPA, remember? She's doing Emily's taxes. I'm trying to help." Jess didn't buy it. She called me. I called Sandra. Sandra was confused. "No, honey," she said gently. "Your mom never brought me anything. But listen, request a duplicate W-2 from your job. Have them send it to my office. I'll file your taxes for you, free of charge." I was embarrassed and relieved at the same time. Mom, when she found out, went ballistic. "Oh, so you don't trust me now?" she yelled over the phone. "You think I'm trying to ruin your life after everything I've done for you?" She never explained why the original had ended up in the trash. We filed my taxes late, but not too late. My financial aid went through. Barely. I told myself it was a weird one-time misunderstanding and tried to forget about it. Big mistake. Second more year, the same thing happened. My W-2s got mailed home. They mysteriously never arrived. When the cafe sent duplicates, those vanished too. This time, there was no Sandra safety net. She'd moved out of state. I had to request another set of duplicates. By the time they came, the tax deadline was looming. FAFSA, which depends on those tax returns, got filed late, which meant my grants dropped. I remember sitting in the financial aid office reading the new award letter. The gap between what I owed and what I had, huge. I called Mom, panicking. Maybe I can't come back next semester. My aid went down." "Well, that's your fault," she said. "Maybe you shouldn't have been so careless with your forms. Maybe college just isn't for you. Lots of people do fine without it." "You threw them out?" I said quietly. "How dare you accuse me? After everything I have sacrificed. I didn't get to go to college. I had to work. I had to raise you. You think it's fair you get 4 carefree years while I struggle alone?" Carefree. That word rattled around my head long after we hung up. If college was carefree, why was I working crew time during the semester, full-time in summer, filling out forms at midnight, counting every dollar in my bank account? Carefree wasn't the word I'd use. But to her, any amount of independence I had, any time I wasn't physically in her house, doing her chores or listening to her problems, was luxury, and she couldn't stand it. That summer, she started saying something new to her friends on the phone. It's so hard when your kids are in college. They eat you out of house and home. They never send you money. They call you only when they need something. And of course, their father pays nothing. I'd be sitting at the kitchen table, eating ramen I'd bought with my own paycheck, listening to her describe me like a parasite. Every time I opened my mouth to defend myself, I heard that old threat. If you tell people what happens in this house, they'll take you away from me. I was too old for that to be literally true now, but the fear had sunk deep. So I stayed silent. On the outside. Inside, something was starting to crack.
The summer before my junior year should have been normal. Work, save, go back to school. Instead, it became the tipping point. I moved back home to save on rent, picked up a full-time job, and planned every dollar. Mom had been jobless for 3 years at that point. Whenever I asked if she was looking, she had a new excuse. My depression is bad right now. The job market is terrible. I'm too old. No one will hire me. It would just barely cover childcare. Oh wait, my children are grown and still won't help me. She said the last part with a bitter laugh. Meanwhile, our house needed repairs, had constant shut-off notices, ran on instant noodles and canned soup. I paid for most of my own food. I'd come home from work with groceries, and she'd sigh dramatically. I guess I should be thankful you're feeding yourself, she'd say. God knows your father never did. If I labeled a couple of items, milk, frozen meals, with my name so I'd have something to take to work, she'd rip off the labels. This is my house. There's no your food here. Everything is ours. Translation, everything is hers. The phone bell was the final straw. One night, she slapped it onto the table in front of me. You want to keep wasting money on that stupid cell phone? She demanded. Fine, then you can pay this phone bill so I can call my friends. You're so selfish, using all your money for yourself. I looked at the long distance charges. Hours and hours to people in other states. Not a single call from my number. I'm not the one calling Florida for 3 hours. Wrong move. She exploded. She screamed, "You think you're better than me now? You think just because you're in college, you're too good to help your mother? You eat my food, sleep in my house, use my water, and then act like you're doing me a favor?" I quietly pointed out that I was buying most of my own food. She grabbed the trash bag, ripped it out of the can, and dumped it in the middle of the kitchen floor. You want to be an adult? You can start by cleaning this up. This was her pattern. Make a mess, blame someone else, demand they fix it. I'd been following that pattern all my life. I didn't have a word for it back then, but later on the internet would call it what it was. Raised by a narcissist. At the time, all I knew was that I was exhausted. By late August, I had scraped together $1,000. Not a fortune, but for me, it was huge. Enough, I thought, to at least get me in the door for junior year. I'd been in constant contact with the university. Every time I called, they reassured me. You're fine. Your aid is processed. Your loans are approved. Move-in day came. I loaded 2 suitcases, my backpack, and a box of books into the bus. I felt cautiously hopeful. That hope lasted right until the housing office guy typed my ID number into his computer, frowned, and said, it says you're not clear to move in." "Why not?" I asked, already sweating. "It looks like you still owe about $10,000 on your account. We need at least 50% of the semester's balance paid before we can release your room key." My brain stopped. 10,000? I repeated. "Yeah," he said, like it was nothing. "You can go over to the bursar's office and talk to them." I wheeled my suitcases back out into the parking lot and called Mom. Straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. No answer. I sat on the curb in the heat the sun beating down on my neck, and did something that felt almost illegal. I called my father.
He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "You all moved in?" "Not exactly," I said. "They won't let me. They say I owe $10,000 before they give me a key." Silence. Then his voice sharper. "What? Em, why am I hearing about this now?" "Because I just found out," I said helplessly. "I've been calling them all summer. They kept saying everything was fine." He let out a breath. "Okay," he said. "Stay put. I'm coming." It was a 2-hour drive. He got there in 90 minutes. He showed up with a coffee and a donut in his hands. "For you," he said, pressing them into my palms. "You look like you haven't eaten." We sat in the student union. My voice shook as I explained everything: the shredded W-2s, the late FAFSA, the dropped grants, the constant money stress. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "Let's go talk to some people." We spent the day going from office to office: financial aid, bursar, housing, back to financial aid. Every time someone tried to brush us off with "that's just policy," he asked questions. What's the total cost? What aid is she eligible for? What loans can she take? What can I sign to make this happen? Finally, we landed on an answer. I qualified for a private student loan big enough to cover the gap if I had a co-signer with good credit. Dad co-signed on the spot. Then he wrote a check for the remaining balance that the loan didn't cover. No guilt trip, no lecture, just "you're going to school. We'll figure the rest out later." By evening, I had my key. We hauled my suitcases up to my room. I sank down on the bed and burst into tears, not the quiet, careful tears I had learned to cry at home, but big, messy sobs. Dad sat in the desk chair, let me cry, and then said quietly, "Em, we need to talk about your mother." The truth about the money. We went to a diner off campus. It was the kind of place where the plates were heavy and the coffee was endless. He waited until the waitress set down our food. Then he said, "I didn't want to drag you into this before, but after today, you need to know what's really been going on." He started with the basics. Ever since the divorce, he had been paying the mortgage on our house, the property taxes, and $2,000 a month in child support. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "2,000? I repeated. "Every month," he said. "On time, for years." I thought about our empty pantry, the shut-off notices, the way Mom acted like checking the mail was a form of torture. "She told us you barely gave her anything," I said. "She said she could barely keep the lights on." He shook his head. "The agreement was actually very generous," he said. "I wanted you and Jess to have stability. The understanding was that she'd use the support to cover groceries, utilities, and college expenses when the time came." College. I thought of all the times she'd patted my head and said, "I wish I could help, but your father just doesn't pay enough." "I found out last year," he went on, "that she never helped Jess with tuition. Your sister did most of it with scholarships and loans. I co-signed one for her when she finally told me what was going on." He paused, watching my face. "I had no idea you were in the same situation. Every time I asked your mother if she needed help with your tuition, she said, 'I've got it covered, just send the checks.'" I felt like the floor had tilted. "All those years," I said slowly, "she acted like you were starving us, like we were barely scraping by. But you were paying the mortgage and $2,000? "Yes." "Then where did it go?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I saw it in my head. The takeout, the new clothes, the nights out, the boxes from online shopping. "Em," he said gently,
I need to ask you something. Since you started college, how much has your mother actually paid for? I thought about it. Tuition, I paid it from my aid and loans. Books, my part-time job. Food, meal plan, plus whatever I bought. Housing, dorm, covered by aid and loans. Nothing. She hasn't paid anything. He nodded slowly. That's what I suspected. Then he laid out his idea.
The plan. For the next year, he said, I'm scheduled to keep paying your mother child support at the same rate. That's what the court ordered. I nodded. But given that you're living on campus most of the year, and given that she's not using that money to support you or your sister, I think it's time to revisit that order. I stared at him. You can do that? I asked. I can ask a judge to look at the facts, he said. I can show that she's been taking money meant for you and Jess and not using it for its intended purpose. I can propose an alternative. What kind of alternative? That the money I'm paying her now go directly toward your education and living expenses instead. That I pay the school, not her. That the mortgage obligation ends and she either takes over the house or sells it. In other words, that I keep supporting you, but stop supporting her lifestyle. The words hung between us. Part of me panicked. I shall hate me, I whispered. She'll say I betrayed her. She always says she has nothing without that money. He looked at me steadily. Em, you've been living with nothing. She's had more than enough. This isn't about punishing her. It's about protecting you. He let that sit for a moment. Then he added, almost rightly, besides, it'll actually be cheaper for me to pay directly for your college than to keep paying what I'm paying now. That stunned me. For my entire life, money had been this scarce, fragile thing. We'd been told there was never enough. To hear that my tuition, a massive number in my mind, was less than the money she'd been taking all along, something inside me clicked. For years, Mom had said, if you don't like it, complain to your father. And I'd always thought that meant complain about him. But sitting there in that diner with a folder of proof in front of us, I realized she never thought I'd actually complain to him about her. What do you need from me? I asked. He opened his bag and pulled out a folder. Printouts, he said. Your tuition bills, bank statements, anything that shows you've been paying for school yourself. I'll handle the legal side, but I need evidence. So we spent that afternoon in the computer lab on campus, logging into my student account, downloading PDFs, highlighting dates, amounts, balances. He was methodical. Here's your loan disbursement, he said. Here's your payment. Here's the gap that wouldn't exist if your mother were using even half of that child support for its intended purpose. At one point, he looked up and said quietly, "You've been doing this all alone, haven't you?" I shrugged. Jess helped me with the FAFSA the first time. Sandra helped the first year with taxes. He shook his head, half in admiration, half in anger. You never should have had to. But I had. By the time we were done, the folder was thick. He closed it with a soft thud. Okay. Now I can show the court what's really going on. We walked back to my dorm. At the door, he hugged me and said, I'm proud of you, not just for school, for surviving all of this. After he left, I sat on my bed, staring at my phone. For years, Mom had said, if you don't like it, complain to your father.
I'd finally done it. And I had no idea what kind of storm was about to hit. The explosion. It didn't take long. About a month later, my phone lit up with Mom's name. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered. "Hello? What did you do?" she screamed. I held the phone away from my ear. "What are you talking about?" "You know perfectly well what I'm talking about," she snapped. "Your father just filed to modify child support. There's gonna be a hearing. A hearing, Emily. He's telling the court I don't support my own children. Where do you think he got that idea, huh?" I took a breath. He got it from the tuition bills and my bank statements, and the fact that you haven't paid a dime toward my college. "How dare you?" she hissed. "After everything I've done for you, do you have any idea how hard I've worked, how much I've sacrificed?" I thought of the inheritance, the 3 years without a job, the nights out, the shut-off notices. I know Dad pays the mortgage and $2,000 a month. I know Jess had to pay her own way through school. I know you shredded my W-2s twice. Silence. Then her voice colder. "So he's turned you against me." "Of course. He was always jealous. He couldn't stand that I got custody. Now he's bribed you with money?" "That's not what happened," I said. "You weren't using that money for us." "You think he cares about you," she sneered. "He's doing this to save his own skin. He doesn't want to pay anything. You're just a convenient excuse." I pictured him driving 2 hours with a donut and a coffee and standing in line at offices all day so I could enroll. Maybe he doesn't want to pay for long-distance phone calls in Sephora anymore, I said before I could stop myself. She gasped. "You ungrateful little..." She stopped, then took a breath, switching gears. "You will listen to me. If he gets that support taken away, I will have nothing. Do you understand? Nothing. They will take this house. I'll be on the street. It will be on your conscience." The guilt slid in on autopilot. "I don't want you to be homeless. I want the money that's supposed to help me to actually help me. You selfish brat. I hope your fancy degree keeps you warm when your mother is dead because you abandoned her." And she hung up. I stared at my phone, hands trembling. Part of me wanted to call back and apologize, tell her we could forget the whole thing. Another part of me, the part that remembered empty cupboards and shredded W-2s, whispered, "If you back down now, nothing will ever change." I opened my laptop and started studying for my midterms, because life doesn't pause just because your world is tilting. Utilities, guilt trips, and Christmas. When manipulation doesn't work one way, people like my mom just try another angle. A few weeks after that phone call, she rang again. Her tone was oddly calm. "So," she said, "your father's pulling his little stunt. Fine. But since he wants to starve his own ex-wife, I hope you're ready to help out. The electric is about to get shut off. So is the water. If you want to come home for winter break, you'll have to pitch in." "Why is the electric getting shut off?" I asked. "He's still paying child support until the court changes it, right?" "That money barely covers anything," she said. "You would understand. You're off living your little princess life on campus." "A princess who works part-time and eats instant noodles," I said. "How much do you owe?" She rattled off numbers that did not add up to, I have no money at all, given what Dad had told me. "I'm sorry," I said, "I can't cover that. I'm barely keeping up with my own bills." "Well, then I guess I'll be sitting in the dark at Christmas," she said. "I'm sure your father will be thrilled." I hesitated. Dad already invited me to spend Christmas with him and Diane. He said I can stay the whole break. Silence. You're not coming home for Christmas? She asked, voice rising. I'll come visit, I said carefully, as long as the utilities are on. She gasped like I'd slapped her. You heartless child! You'd rather spend Christmas with them than with your own mother after everything I've done for you? Last Christmas, she'd thrown most of my belongings out onto the front lawn in garbage bags because I hadn't come home one weekend to help her clean. Clothes, books, photos, stuffed animals from childhood. It had rained. By the time I got there, half of it was ruined. She shrugged and said, maybe if you cared about your things, this wouldn't have happened. That was my present. I'll miss you, I said, but I'm not spending Christmas in a house with no heat and no water. Let me know when the bills are paid. She hung up. Later, Dad called to check in. Your mother tells me the power's off. Is that why you're coming here for Christmas? That and the fact that she threw my stuff on the lawn last year. He sighed. I'm still paying child support until the court rules. There's no reason for the power to be off, except that she's not paying the bill. I'm gonna call her. I don't know exactly what he said on that call, but I know the gist. He reminded her the payments were current. He reminded her the mortgage was still being handled. He told her the judge wouldn't be impressed to hear she couldn't keep the lights on with that much support. Magically, the utilities were restored within days. She called me to announce it. Well, I found a way to get the power back on, so you can come home for Christmas now if you have any decency left. I already told Dad I'd stay with him, but I'll come visit for a day. You'll regret this, she said tearfully. One day I'll be gone and you'll realize you chose his money over your mother. Guilt twisted in my chest, but underneath it, something firmer. I'm not choosing money. I'm choosing sanity. I spent Christmas at Dad's house, in a warm living room with a decorated tree and two much younger half-siblings who thought I was cool. I felt like an outsider and a family member at the same time. It was confusing. It was also the calmest Christmas I had in years.
Court day was a difficult day. The hearing was scheduled for spring. I didn't have to testify, but Dad kept me in the loop. He asked if I wanted to be there. Part of me did. Part of me couldn't imagine sitting in a room while my mother glared at me. In the end, I stayed at school and waited for updates by phone. Afterward, Dad called. It's done, he said. What happened? He ran through it. His lawyer had presented proof of every mortgage and tax payment he made, records of child support payments, my tuition bills, my financial aid records, my bank statements showing payments to the university, a statement from Jess about how Mom hadn't helped her with her college costs either. They'd shown that my mother had not worked for several years, received a substantial inheritance, continued to receive generous support, failed to use it for the purposes outlined in the divorce agreement. Her side, apparently, was all emotion. She was a struggling single mother. She was in poor health. We ate her out of house and home. She couldn't work. It was unfair to take away what she needed to survive. The judge looked at the numbers. Then the judge looked at the facts. The final order: child support terminated for me since I was in college and not living at home. My father
authorized to pay my tuition and school-related expenses directly. Mortgage. His obligation ended. Either she took over or the house would be sold. She was instructed to cooperate with the sale if she couldn't afford it. It was, as one Reddit commenter might say, a combo child of r/pro-revenge and r/malicious compliance. Mom had spent years saying, "If you don't like it, complain to your father." So I did, and the system agreed with him. That night, my phone rang. I knew who it was. Fallout. "You happy now?" she demanded, not even saying hello. "Mom, no, don't mom me. Because of you and your precious father, I'm losing everything. The judge took away my child support. Your father doesn't have to pay the mortgage anymore. I'm going to be out on the streets, and it's all your fault." "The judge didn't take it away because of me," I said. "He changed it because you weren't using it for us." "You ungrateful brat. I fed you, I clothed you, I sacrificed my life for you, and this is how you repay me? Helping your father humiliate me in court?" I thought of every night I'd cooked, every bill I'd paid, every shift I'd worked to cover gaps she'd left. "I'm just asking that the money meant for my education actually go to my education," I said. "That money was mine," she hissed. "Compensation for everything he put me through, for every year I gave up." "It was child support," I said softly. "For the child. Me." Silence crackled on the line. Then she said, like a curse, "I hope your degree keeps you warm when no one wants you, because you clearly don't know how to be loyal to family." She hung up. I sat on my dorm bed, phone in my hand, feeling both lighter and sadder than I'd felt in years. This was the cost. Choosing myself meant losing the version of my mother who existed in my head, the one who might someday look at me and say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong." That woman was never going to appear. Life after the storm. After the hearing, things moved fast. Dad took over tuition officially. He made sure my FAFSA was filed on time. Hell, he drove over with my W-2 in hand so it couldn't mysteriously vanish. He sat down with me and Diane to make a real budget. Rent for when I graduated, emergency savings, loan payments, groceries. We talked about interest rates and credit scores. It was the kind of practical parenting that should be boring. To me, it felt like a revelation. Someone was planning for the future with me, not using my future as a weapon. Mom, meanwhile, had to face a reality she'd been avoiding. Without child support and a free mortgage, her house was suddenly very expensive. She stalled on selling it for as long as possible. She moved a boyfriend in to help with the bills. He lasted less than a year. She picked fights with real estate agents about the listing price. She complained to anyone who would listen that her ungrateful ex-husband and children were forcing her to give up her home. Eventually, the house sold for less than she thought it was worth. She moved to another state with a boyfriend, burned through the profits, broke up, bounced between relatives' spare rooms, and repeated the same pattern. No job, endless complaints, everyone else to blame. Years later, after cycling through a few more relationships and burning multiple bridges, she ended up in subsidized housing. A small loft-style apartment, cute, honestly. She hates it. No one wants to take me in. No one cares what happens to me. I did everything for my kids, and look how they repaid me. I used to feel a sharp stab of guilt every time she said that. Now I mostly feel tired. Because here's the thing, she wasn't always cruel. There were good days. Days when she'd braid my hair. Days when we'd watch movies and she'd laugh so hard she'd cry. Days when she'd hold my hand crossing the street and squeeze just a little tighter. Those memories kept me hooked for a long time. But good moments don't erase years of emotional abuse. You can love someone and still decide they are too dangerous to your sanity to be in charge of your life.
Where we are now. People often ask two questions when they hear the short version of this story. Do you still talk to your mom? And do you regret what you did? The answers are yes and no. I do still talk to her. We have a shallow relationship. We text on birthdays. We exchange quick phone calls on holidays. I don't tell her about my private life in detail. I don't ask for advice. I don't lean on her when things go wrong. Because she will always respond with some version of, how does this affect me? Or, I had it worse. Once, a couple of years ago, she was trying to convince me to move to her state and let her live in my spare room so we can be close again. I hesitated, said something non-committal. She later called my sister and said, "Can you believe it? I have a daughter who doesn't want to take care of me." Jess and I laugh about that sometimes. Not even 50, perfectly healthy, and already trying to retire on her children. Jess said, "She hasn't changed." As for regret, I regret that my childhood was what it was. I regret that the adult who was supposed to protect me didn't notice sooner. But I don't regret telling my father the truth. I don't regret handing him that thick folder of proof. I don't regret the judge looking at the numbers and finally saying, in legal language, "No, this isn't okay." Because here's what changed after we did what we did. I finished college without dropping out from financial strain. My loans, while still real, were manageable because Dad stepped in when he should have. I built a career slowly, without the constant drain of sending money home to support someone who refused to support herself. I learned that love does not mean tolerating abuse. Most importantly, I learned that I'm allowed to say, "This is not my responsibility." I'm not responsible for my mother's happiness. I'm not responsible for fixing her life. I am not responsible for giving up my future so she can avoid facing her past. I did what she always told me to do. I complained to my father. Turns out, he was listening. The real revenge. People hear this story and call it revenge. They love the part where the court cuts off her child support and mortgage help. They cheer when they hear that it was cheaper for Dad to pay my college costs directly than to keep handing her blank checks. Some comment something like, "This is what happens when r/raised by narcissists, r/malicious compliance, and r/pro-revenge have a baby." And sure, there is satisfaction in the justice of it all. The woman who spent years weaponizing child support, who treated us like staff and my father like an ATM, finally got told no by someone she couldn't manipulate. It is satisfying to imagine the look on her face when the judge said the payments were ending. But the more I think about it,
the more I realized the real revenge wasn't the money, it was the truth. For the first time, someone outside our house saw her without the mask. They saw the empty promises, the financial neglect, the way she used her children as emotional and economic crutches. They saw that she'd had resources and chosen not to use them responsibly. They saw that the story she'd told for years of being the overworked, under-supported single mom fighting a cruel ex wasn't the whole story, and they didn't buy it. The real revenge was me stepping out of the crooked room I'd grown up in and realizing I didn't have to keep standing tilted to match her angle. It was learning that I was allowed to be loved without being used. That I could say, I need help, and not be told I was selfish. That I could exist without constantly apologizing for taking up space and food and air. What I'd tell my younger self. If I could go back in time and talk to 9-year-old me standing in the kitchen with a broken glass in the sink, here's what I'd say. You are not stupid. You are not lazy. You are not ungrateful. You are a child doing an adult's job because the adult in the room won't. It's not your fault there's no breakfast. It's not your fault the lights are off. It's not your fault your mother won't work. You're allowed to need things. You're allowed to tell the truth. You're allowed to ask for help from someone who actually cares. And one day, you will. You'll pick up a phone, call your father, and say, something's wrong. He will believe you. He will show up with coffee and a donut and a pen to sign whatever needs signing. He will do what parents are supposed to do. He will fix what he can. And when your mother screams that you betrayed her, that you chose money over family, remember this. You didn't choose money, you chose yourself. You chose the chance to build a life where your worth isn't measured by how much you can endure. So no, I don't regret doing what my mom always told me to do. For years, if you don't like it, complain to your father was an accusation, a dismissal, a way to shut down conversation. The day I finally followed that instruction, it became something else. The first step toward getting out. She thought it would make him the villain in my eyes. Instead, it revealed who the real villain had been all along. And that, in the end, is the kind of revenge you don't spend, you live it.